All right, we're back with Rock Forever. We got another special guest. You know him. He's the guitarist, songwriter of not only TKO and Q5, but the Rick Pierce group. Please welcome Rick Pierce.
Hey, thank you, Jay. Great to be with you.
Yeah, great to see you, Rick. Like I say, I go back to the early days, man, when you were coming out with your first material. So always great to see the survivors, the people that are still doing it. I always feel that you were meant to do it, if you're still doing it. It's it's in your heart.
The blessing is knowing that, being secure in that knowledge.
No doubt. Well, take us back to the beginning. Like I say, I was up there in that Seattle, Vancouver area, late 70s. Talk about, picking up the guitar for the first time, how old you were, and who were your major influences? Who really inspired you to do it?
Well, without hesitation, I'd say Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page, and everything about Led Zeppelin was my inspiration. And grew up and went to school in Yakima, Washington, Eastern Washington, and had kind of a band scene there with some people I ended up playing with in TKO. And we came and went in various bands. I moved to Seattle to go to University of Washington, and junior year dropped out just for 1 quarter. Mom, I'm going to be in a band and make some money, and then I'll go back to school. Yeah, still waiting on that one. But it was after that it was various bands, and I ended up bringing some of my old Yakima bandmates in with me on some of the bands I was in Seattle. Among them, Mojo Hand, the Whiz Kids, and it was Mojo Hand that eventually morphed into TKO, and we hooked up with good management and production then, and went for that big ride.
Yeah, talk about making that first TKO album. Who was the manager? Who was the producer? And why did you choose them? And what made that a strong team?
Well, in those days, you were the chosen one. You didn't as much choose them. Our manager was Ken Kinnear, with whom I'm still very good friends, and he was the manager of Mojo Hand. He had the lease on a showcase, the Moore Theater in Seattle, and with that he started Albatross Productions. So he was a promoter, concert promoter, and manager. And he went on to manage Heart after Mojo Hand. That was a painful meeting for him, I'm sure, but it all worked out great. And John Bauer ended up being his associate too. I understand you worked for.
Yeah, promoting all those great shows, the Paramount Theater, Seattle Coliseum, the Arena.
And at risk of dating myself, I first met Ken when the Whiz Kids, which was something like bordering on what the Tubes were doing at the time, but not nearly as good musically, but as big a show. We opened for the New York Dolls at Ken's Moore Theater, and that was for Brad and me, the singer for TKO. That was our first kind of big time gig.
And who produced the first TKO album?
It was Mike Flicker, who was also producing Heart at the time, did Dreamboat Annie, and they were doing Dog and Butterfly at the same time that we were recording Let It Roll in the same studio with Mike Flicker.
Yeah, that's hallowed halls. Yeah, I moved to the area in '76 and jumped on that promotion bandwagon for Dreamboat Annie, and just to see an independent band explode like that, and Heart still to this day. And I've recently spoken to Roger Fisher and Howard Leese and Nancy Wilson, and again, still doing it, loving it. And rock and roll keeps you young,
That's right.
The years tick by, but we still listen to that same music we did growing up, and it takes you right back to where you were when you heard it.
Oh yeah. I still get I see Roger from time to time, and Howard I saw when he was appeared with Bad Company up here, and I got to see him backstage.
Yeah, Paul Rogers. I mean, what a voice. I mean, that guy is unbelievable. His voice is stronger than it was 50 years ago in the 70s. You know, it's
what a gig, man. And he deserves it.
Yeah, yeah. Howard's a great guy, and Paul. I saw him recently with Jeff Beck and Ann Wilson. It was a triple bill at the San Diego Outdoor Amphitheater, and it was Paul was doing the free thing. Unfortunately, it wasn't with Howard. He had pulled in some of the original guys or some of his bandmates from the UK. So
yeah, Mick Ralphs, I'm sure was there, and Simon Kirk, the drummer, who was very underrated.
I remember seeing Bad Company at the Seattle Coliseum, and so many great shows up there, you know, by the Space Needle. But now tell us, you know, I know that TKO gave it a good shot, and you guys hit the road as you could, and you infamously played with the mighty Van Halen and Hart and many others at the Texas Jam down in Dallas. Talk about that experience.
Oh, that was really, really quite an experience. And if the Moore Theater was our first big gig, boy, that definitely Texas Jam was the biggest. 80,000 people in the Cotton Bowl. Our set was simulcast, and we went on first, so no pressure there. It was quite an experience. It was hotter than blazes, and they had the fire hoses out cooling down the crowd, but it was a great experience, I gotta say.
Yeah, I know that Texas heat, you know, gets a little humid, and by noon it's well over 100 and feels like 120, you know, with that humidity. And you know, I'm sure you could barely touch anything on stage without feeling the burn. But I know your friends
we pulled it off though. Yeah, simulcast and all, and it didn't sound bad.
Yeah, well, I know your friends with Hart were there, and of course Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen is walking around, David Lee Roth and everybody. And
they were at the height of their powers, and that was really a privilege to be on that same bill. And David Lee Roth, so flamboyant, and it was great to see an American band.
We're used to, like you say, the Zeppelins and the Deep Purples and the you know, all of those bands from across the pond, you know, and Black Sabbath and all that. And now here comes an American band, and of course Heart being an American band. Who else was on the bill? Was it Boston, or who else was on that show?
Boston. Boston, I think, was on top of the bill. It's somewhat of a blur, it being the late 70s. But let's see, the Texas Jam.
Was that 78 or 79?
It was 79. And Boston and Hart at the top of the bill. I don't think AC/DC was on that one, but they were on one right either before or right after the Texas Jam. It was the Mississippi River Festival. And that was when we went on right before AC/DC. Not an enviable task, but
well, at least you didn't have to follow them. That would have been hard.
Right, that would have been something.
Yeah, I know Van Halen followed AC/DC on that same summer at the Day on the Green, you know, in San Francisco, and Angus and Eddie, you know, clicked off a great relationship that lasted all those years. But that show in Oakland was like Aerosmith, Foreigner, Pat Travers, Van Halen, and AC/DC. It's Eddie was in his trailer, and he said he had never seen AC/DC before. He said, "Man, who's making all that racket out there, man? that's a lot of noise."
And our sound people were telling us, "Man, you guys are going to sound so much better. You know, there's weight. You know, they had all these Marshall stacks, and man, it was all a quasi-religious experience. They were so loud, and it was wonderful." Yeah, those were the days of Bond too, who was pleasure to hang with. Just
Mighty Bon Scott, it's
really not what you'd think. A pleasant, fun.
yeah.
Quiet.
Bon was good natured. He was fun. He was ready for the party, and
You
I'm
said
sure
it.
checking
Yeah.
out the girls and having a few drinks. He was the real deal.
Oh yeah.
Well, please tell us about how, I know some other bands in between, but how did it morph into the mighty Q5?
Q5 did actually morph out of a TKO Mark II. I left the band in a kind of a management confusion and returned to the band after most of the second album was recorded, with a guitar player who went on to become Adam Baum, Adam. And I did return in time to take part in the very final sessions for that album. And then at the time, Evan Sheely, the bass player, and Gary Thompson, our drummer, were also working on demos with Floyd Rose and Jonathan Kay, which eventually turned into Q5. And en masse, we joined up with Floyd and Jonathan. A big factor, I think, was that I still, as I told you, I still had a good relationship with Ken Kinnear, and he had agreed to manage the band, which became Q5. Just a slight correction. While I did contribute songs to Q5, a major composer of that was Floyd Rose, and that's also the case with my group, my present group now, Rick Pierce Group. It's a collaboration, songwriting wise, of myself and Floyd Rose.
Yeah, well, we know Floyd has become infamous, with the locking tremolo, and everybody from Edward Van Halen to Neil Schon to Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, everybody, uses it, and he was in the right place at the right time. Yeah, no one had to lock those strings in, to keep it in tune, man. It was nuts before that. People hit that whammy bar and then they'd have to change guitars.
A security blanket.
Yeah. Now, how did you meet Floyd? And was he playing in other bands prior to that? How did it morph into you playing with him?
He was, and he was even he was singing in some bands too. That we'd be in the same band at different periods of time on the Seattle club scene, and Floyd was playing guitar and singing all the time while he was working on his invention that he went on to patent. He was when I started playing with Floyd, he was making the tremolos in his basement and shipping them out of there at a machine shop there at home.
Yeah, I know it got way too popular to do that for much longer.
Oh, yeah.
But just a side note, Texas Jam 79, Blue Oyster Cult, Boston, Heart,
Okay.
Nazareth, Sammy Hagar, Van Halen, and TKO. So the future Van Halen singer was also in the house.
Right. Okay. And I do remember playing the gigs with Sammy Hagar, also a splendid fellow. And I knew he was also on the that Mississippi River Festival that was in St. Louis that had AC/DC on the bill.
Yeah, Sammy's still doing it at his age, man, just loving it. I mean, he goes all the way back to Montrose, 73.
Too. I just saw him fairly recently.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, he's the real deal, and it's hard to follow David Lee Roth, but Sammy was his own man, and loved to run around the stage and rock the crowd, whether it was a club or a stadium.
Yeah. Hardest working man in showbiz.
That's for sure. Now, I know there was a Q5 reunion, you guys, Music for Nations, and Floyd was unable to, be a part of that. But what was that like to, kind of reunite and do your thing over in the UK?
Well, it was cool. The reunion was for the actually the Sweden Rock Festival in 2014. it was made easier by the fact that Jonathan, the singer, and I stayed together after the dissolution of Q5 in the late 80s and formed a band called Nightshade. We did 3 albums as Nightshade over almost 20 years. Played quite a bit through the grunge era in Seattle, which was definitely an uphill slog, but we stuck with it. And we still played a lot of our old Q5 hits and relied on that, but also had the 3 newer Nightshade albums, which all concentrated on some of the more heavy aspect of what Q5 had been doing. That made it easier because promoters in Europe were saying Q5 still had somewhat of a cult status there. And they said, well, especially when we added Evan back to the band, right around 2000 or so, they said, well, you got 3/4 of or 3/5 of the original Q5. Why don't we just call you Q5 instead of Nightshade? Because of their cult status, they thought they could sell some more tickets that way. And we actually did start doing that in 2009. And in 2014, we did the reunion for the Sweden Rock Festival, which was a very big deal. It was, I think the headliner on that was Black Sabbath with Ozzy and Alice Cooper were co-headlining in 2014. That featured just Nightshade as it was. It was Frankie Rongo, my current drummer, Evan Sheely, Jonathan Scott Kay, and Rick Van Zant, the current guitar player for Metal Church, a good friend of mine, took Floyd's place as Floyd declined to come with it, although he was totally in support of us doing it.
That's great. Well, I know that was kind of like I say, a weird twist of history there, because living up there in the late 70s, the big deal was, well, Jimi Hendrix was from Seattle, and then of course Heart was taken off. You guys were coming up, but who would have thought 10 years later Seattle would be the epicenter of what I know the bands never called it, but the critics called it grunge.
Right.
What was that like when you saw that coming up? Because you probably saw Alice in Chains and Soundgarden as pretty much being a hard rock band with a little more of a punk alternative, vein. But by the time Nirvana exploded and, Pearl Jam, came out, it had to be a little strange, thinking, damn, who saw that coming?
It was really strange. And with Seattle being the epicenter of this, and they'd asked me about it, and I wish I had seen it coming more clearly than I did. But musically, you're right. There was a lot of just good hard rock and some fantastic singers. I'm friends with some of those fellows, and I'm really happy to say that they a lot of those guys hold, like, say, Brad and myself in high esteem, more so than I would have thought, and Floyd too. But it was definitely a tough time to be a self-proclaimed metal band. I mean, they were calling them grunge. They were calling us way worse than that.
Yeah, it was it was strange. MTV had so much power back then that when the programmers at MTV said, all right, enough of these 80s hard rock bands, we're going to start focusing on grunge. I mean, everything shifted just because of MTV.
It was like somebody flipped a switch, and then and people I knew, sorry to cut you off, Jake, people I knew well that did the same kind of stuff that we did, overnight, all of a sudden they just changed their attire. They went to the to that look, the singles movie.
There was a lot of flannel being sold in the secondhand stores.
Doc Martens being paraded about, and that was kind of the statement. So it was almost like a brief fashion deal, but those were kind of tough times for Nightshade, as we tried to stay true to our music and our image. And I guess the plus side was when a national band would come through, that was more in the hard rock, heavy metal vein, we were about the only ones that were actually doing that kind of music so we could open for them. We got a lot of gigs that way.
Yeah, of course. And still today, some of the biggest tours and some of the biggest acts every summer are those hard rock bands from the 70s and 80s. They've lasted or outlasted, everybody. Of course, the Pearl Jams are still doing it. And, Dave Grohl, who was the drummer in Nirvana, is leading the charge with the Foo Fighters. But, they've outlasted.
Yeah, what a remarkable career for him. That's really, we just rewatched Sound City. That movie holds up. That's a fun one.
Yeah, I was at the premiere for that on Sunset Boulevard, Cinerama Dome, and who would have thought that this little studio out in Van Nuys, when you walked into it, it was nothing special, carpet on the walls, and it looked like it had been through, a few, biker fights or something, and that board and the ambience of those walls created so many classic albums, the Tom Petty's and the Fleetwood Macs and Rage Against the Machine, and of course Nirvana, Nevermind album. And everybody who looked at credits were like, where the hell is Sound City? Where the hell is Van Nuys?
But that's what's so cool about it. And that's kind of what I was saying, where the fellas that were the newfound stars of that era still have a reverence for the hard rock that went before them. And that really comes through in that movie. So that's a cool deal.
Yeah, Dio had cut albums over there, all sorts of big, hard rock bands. But I know Dave bought that board, and it's in their studio up in Chatsworth now. Studio 606. Yeah. Well, that brings us to the Rick Pierce Group. I know you've got some amazing new singles, TikTok and Brick by Brick. Sounds awesome. You got a great singer, Chris James, and of course, Frankie and Izzy backing you up. Bring us up to date. Tell us about this, new project. It's Golden Robot Records, of course, which is behind a lot of great rock these days. And is all these part of an album? What's coming up?
Yeah, it is part of an album, and we're very indebted to Mark Alexander Erber for signing us right at the early 2020. Floyd Rose and I had started collaborating on songs while the Q5 reunion was still going on, and we actually, Q5 made an album for Frontiers Records, another label that's doing a lot with older bands. And Floyd and I put together some songs, and I was shopping it, and I got wind of Golden Robot, and I think it was Kimo Tatari from KK Downing's website, the Steel Mill, kind of gave them the nod and said, yeah, these guys are happening. They're signing a lot of bands. So I did. I approached them, and it did not take long. We're very indebted. We're actually on Crusader Records, which is the hard rock metal subsidiary of Golden Robot in Australia. But we do have an album in the can. The plan is we put out these 2 singles, and I think we're looking at either one more single or an album dropping early spring.
Yeah, perfect timing. Definitely. I know the world wants more great hard rock, and there's so many bands, these days. I say everybody with a cell phone, is making music, but the true artists stand out. And having that pedigree, coming out of the late 70s through the 80s, you've got that, like I say, the credits and the perseverance, and having somebody like Floyd Rose in your court definitely doesn't hurt. And, I know, Upward and Onward. What's the name of the album? And can you tell us about the other songs we haven't heard yet?
The new song, actually, Brick by Brick, is Floyd's composition, but when we collaborate, also it'll be my riffs more often, and Floyd's lyrics, which I really like, and Chris James, the vocalist, is kind of Floyd's protege, whom we discovered, and he's just a young whippersnapper. But the other songs we kind of featured the first singles are songs that I feel like fans might more expect from a band named for me. That would be wouldn't be a surprise to fans of especially of Q5 and then the 3 albums with Nightshade. There is some more variation on the album. I think that there'll be some surprises, but a lot of meat and potatoes. So a lot of cranked amps.
Yeah, well, we can't wait and love what Mark and the guys in Australia are doing, and obviously the guys in Italy with Frontiers. Keeping the music alive. It's almost unrecognizable, the record business today that we knew. Coming up in the 70s and 80s, it was all about getting a record deal and getting on the radio, and and then in the later in the 80s, it was trying to get on MTV and all that. But now it's all streaming and the internet and cell phones and, virtual shows and all that. What do you miss the most about the old record business or the industry coming up?
Well, the sheer cultural participation of everybody. There was the rock scene was more homogenous, and everybody pretty much agreed on who was the important bands at any given era. It's somewhat fragmented now, but I guess that's not a bad thing. You have any era of music at your fingertips now. Didn't used to be that way so much, but I would say the big festivals, and that's something that goes on still in Europe. We started playing in Europe in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was a revelation that people still were enjoying our type of music there. It was really gratifying. I mean, the first gig first festival in Europe, Wacken. That was when I finally got to see some early idols of mine. It was Rose Tattoo, and now with Golden Robot, we're on the same label as Rose Tattoo. I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah, we talked to Mark Evans, who's their bass player, who was in AC/DC. Let There Be Rock in those early days, and there was definitely that connection. I remember back in the day picking up those first Rose Tattoo albums, and it's like, man, these guys got that AC/DC kind of vibe, man. That pub rock scene down in Australia is brewing some pretty hardcore stuff.
Really hardcore stuff. Scarred for Life, and oh yeah.
Yeah, Angry Anderson, man. He is still doing it, man. It's unbelievable.
He's still angry. Yeah.
He is. He's pissed off at the world, man. He's gonna let you know about it. Well, Rick, what are the social medias? Is there a website? Where can people, follow what you're doing and anticipate the album?
Well, we're on the usual outlets. We got on Facebook. It's just a Rick Pierce Band Facebook, but everything is kind of centralized on my website, rickpierceguitar.com. My whole recorded catalog is on there, and for streaming or download through the usual outlets. So that's why I would refer fans would be to rickpierceguitar.com. That also connects to our Facebook and any kind of news. And
yeah, that's rickpierceguitar.com. It'll give you all the links to Facebook and all the past, the present, and of course the future. Brick by Brick, go check it out. Awesome song, TikTok, and we can't wait for more. Rick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jay, man. Great talking to you.